Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the I Have a Voice Caregiver Advocacy Series. These Caregiver Advocacy Series are taking place every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. here on Greater Richmond Scan's Facebook page. My name is Olivia Wilson. I'm the Trauma Informed Parent Engagement Coordinator at Greater Richmond Scan, and I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Tamika Daniel, who is the Behavioral Health Community Organizer for Greater Richmond Scan. Tamika is an Easton community resident and mother to 4 children. She began advocating for the needs of her son, who has autism, which led her to advocating on a larger scale in the 10 years of not being employed. She began as SCAN's Behavioral Health Community Organizer in August 2019 through a partnership with Richmond Memorial Health Foundation. Utilizing her expertise and experience, she brings SCAN's work in adverse childhood experiences, trauma, and resilience to the community through trainings and forums. She also assists in building resilience and facilitating healing through empowerment and connection through a trauma-informed and equity lens. Additionally, she brings her voice and advocacy to meetings and tables throughout the community. I also have the pleasure to introduce our very special guest. We have with us today Mauretta Copeland, Dr. Zipporah Levi-Shacklelford, as well as Gabriela Benzel. And I will share a little bit about each of them right now. So Mauretta Copeland is a parent to 2 young adults, one with a developmental disability. Mauretta works for VCU Partnership for People with Disabilities. She serves as a cultural broker to the African American community at the Center for Family Involvement. This involves working with families of children with disabilities to empower them with the necessary tools to navigate disability-related systems and become better advocates. Some of her other experience includes connecting with parents from diverse backgrounds and training professionals around family-centered care. Mauretta is a certified cultural and linguistic competence level 1 facilitator and currently serves on the Virginia Caregivers Coalition and is a board member of the ARC south of the James. So welcome, Loretta Copeland. Dr. Zipporah Levi-Shacklelford is the founder of and the behavior and education consultant for Creative Approach Development Center in Richmond, Virginia. She was inspired by her experiences of being a special needs sibling and a parent who is a strong advocate in the fields of disability, mental health, and education. She assists individuals and families with setting up systems and learning new skills to overcome challenges and behaviors that interfere with reaching goals and increasing independence. She also provides training to businesses and organizations to help them better understand how to support people with disabilities and mental health impairments and those who support them. Zipporah has a doctorate in education and certifications in positive behavior supports, disability leadership, and autism spectrum disorders. She has spoken and trained across the country on these topics and serves on several nonprofit and state boards. Welcome to the conversation, Dr. Z. That is what I understand you go by, so I hope that's okay. And then, awesome. Last but not least, Gabriela Benzel currently serves as Family Literacy Specialist and Family Engagement Coordinator for the Excellence in Children's Early Language and Literacy, also known as ExCELL, the ExCELL program, as well as with communities and schools of Virginia. She currently works in multiple school locations in Virginia, helping families connect with teachers while taking on active role in their children's education. She serves in multiple committees in Richmond Public Schools to advocate for children and families within the school system. Mrs. Benzel coordinates the development of bilingual English-Spanish educational resources to accommodate the growing Spanish-speaking population of Virginia. She actively collaborates with community partners and other organizations to provide families with multiple resources. She is also the host and director of the VPM children's television program, Circle Time at Home, which is an educational TV show for preschoolers and kindergarten. And Mrs. Benzel is going to share a lot more information about that program and many other resources as well. So thank you for being here, Gabriela. Thank you to you all. I'm going to turn this over to Tamika just to share a little bit about our focus for today's conversation.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you guys for tuning in. And thanks to our special guest this evening. Thanks for taking the time out. As you may know or may not know, this is the second part to our education conversation. We did one when we first launched the advocacy series, but the topic is so broad that we felt the need to bring it back to bring some more focus to this topic and get people who probably weren't around for the first go around to give them access to the resources that may be available to help them and assist them with their children. Today's conversation is going to focus on the supports for parents, guardians, caregivers with helping their children of all age groups with different levels of abilities with literacy and other academic needs. Our hope is to highlight the educational resources that exist and share how caregivers can access those resources. We're going to talk about the ways parents and caregivers can advocate for hard to reach resources in order to support the needs of the children in their care. So thank you all again for tuning in, and I'm going to toss it back over to my colleague, and it's good to have you back.
Thank you, Tamika. And so let's jump in. I feel like we've done enough talking, and I think the introductions were wonderful. But I would love to now hear everyone else's voices. So let's jump in with this first question. And this first question is a question that we brought back from our initial conversation. And the question is, what have you found to be the biggest areas of concern within the multiple or the different levels of education? So just speaking on your experiences and what you know, what have you found to be some of the biggest areas of concern within the different levels of education? And that's open to anyone.
Well, I'll start. I think right now, in the current conditions, I think one of the biggest areas of concern is our students learning with the virtual setup. Um, that seems to be the going question in general. But then for those that have additional learning needs, um, that question is being asked even more so. Um, so I think presently that seems to be what the big focus is, and making sure that everybody has access to the learning tools that they need, and then have the right supports in the home. So it's trying to figure out how to modify all of these diverse learning styles in a way that supports everyone, which is a big challenge because it's a challenge even in in-person settings, so it's even more so virtually. um, and then on the flip side, it's trying to help the caregivers kind of take on an additional task of supporting their youth with their learning needs. So I think we're seeing that at all levels. And again, those who require the additional learning supports, um, it's a matter of really trying to figure out how to accommodate and modify, um, for that student's needs. So that's presently what I've been seeing a lot of.
Absolutely, Dr. Z. Thank you for highlighting that, and I concur that that's definitely I believe too one of the biggest areas of concern is really just recognizing all of the different learning styles, and as you said, the different needs, and how do we make those modifications and accommodations to meet all the different learning needs, understanding that, virtual learning, we know that we had to do this, one, because it was in response to a pandemic to keep everyone safe, but then we also just realized how, in some cases, virtual has been a benefit to some students, it has been a detriment to some others. Um, and then it also has, like you said, really identified just how much support is really needed for other learners, and like how do we support, like you said, the caregivers who've had to take on an additional role and task of finding ways to support their children and their educational needs. So I really appreciate you highlighting that area of concern. Um, any other areas of concern that anyone would like to add when we talk about the different levels of education?
I think that I don't know that I would call it concern, but one thing that I think is worthy of noticing that we've seen a lot in this virtual world is that families vary very much at all different levels. You know, so access and, you know, like a caregiving help and stuff like that can really vary, because while we have, you know, families that are able to have a stay-at-home parent or a stay-at-home caregiver that helps them, that are there with additional tutoring and support, then we have other families that face other challenges, parents that either both of them work, or single parents that may not have the same access and accessibility to be there for their children. So I think that this is one year that I think we've all noticed that family engagement, parental engagement is more important than ever. I mean, I have worked family engagement now for years, and one of the things that I always tell parents is, don't forget, you are your child's first and most important teacher. Well, this year is more important than ever. It really has been that year that has showed us that we need that partnership. So while this virtual time has come with a lot of challenges, because it has, I think it also gives us the opportunity for creativity to find better ways to engage those parents, to engage those caregivers, so that that relationship between the teacher or the school administrator and the parent changes into a partnership. You know, because that is really the only and best way that we can provide the best possible resources for our children. And one of the things that I think we've gotten very crafty with, and this workshop is one of those things, is that we're giving parents the accessibility and opportunity to attend things or find out about resources in a virtual way that is flexible for them, that maybe before they couldn't attend in person because of work impediments and things like that. So while we do have some concerns, I do feel like this is maybe the start for us to have a dual model in which we support in-person parents, you know, once things get back to normal, whenever that happens, but also keeping some of this virtual settings and opportunities for parents to remain involved and maybe more engaged into the school system.
Absolutely. Oh,
I just wanted to jump into, I know the question was about the challenge, but I think another benefit, kind of, you know, piggybacking on what Gabriela just said and shared, is that I feel like the current system and changes has brought more awareness that self-care and mental health supports are needed across the gamut. You know, I think before, like pre-COVID, you know, we were kind of thinking of it as just like this little maybe add-on unit that talks about mental health and self-care and mindfulness. And I think now that we see that that needs to be more involved and embedded throughout learning and throughout the different age groups, and as well for caregivers. So I think in addition to providing these different resources in a format that makes it more accessible for caregivers, it's also bringing more awareness and more of those tools for taking care of not just the students' learning needs, but also the students and the caregivers' mindfulness and mental health needs as well. So I think that's a plus, you know, on top of the different challenges.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we do have some concerns in regards to some of those things this year. Things that used to seem like self-care, like you said, or social interactions or support groups and things like that were things that before we kind of saw as luxuries or add-ons. But especially during this time that we feel so disconnected from others, disconnected from our schools, our children feel disconnected from other students and things like that. It is an area of concern to think about. While there are a lot of benefits because we're having this conversation, it is also very important that that becomes something that becomes a norm, that families, teachers, and students start to build this as part of their culture, as part of the everyday life, because self-care and mental health and many parent support groups and things like that, they're not just extras anymore, especially during this time that I feel like so many people have dealt with challenges. It's been an eye-opener about how it's a necessity. Right. And how we need not only school partnerships, but even community partnerships and supports, because otherwise, I mean, how do you even get it done this year? You have to work, you have to do so many things, you have to also take care of your children. I mean, the only way to do it is through those partnerships, through that self-care and that support. Right.
Thank you all so much. Yes. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't cut anyone off.
I just wanted to piggyback off what everyone said. It has been great benefits, but it still comes with those challenges. Like for me, single mom, I have the luxury of being able to work from home, but then there's my son has autism. He has a one-on-one, another benefit, but downside, she can't be there unless I'm there. So what do you do when, like you said, Gabriela, when you're a mom, you're the sole provider, but now I'm in the process of trying to move. I have appointments. I have to get Social Security cards. I can't miss them because the appointments is stretched months out. So I have to be there. I can't be home. He can't get his one-on-one. He can't log on to school. So it's like, what then do I do?
But then I think that brings more awareness to that situation, right? Because even with in-person learning, there's times where the school had expectations for you to be there for something, or even helping with homework. So again, I think it just brings these different challenges more to, more front and center, so that the schools can start being more creative and developing these alternatives. Like Gabriela said, again, I'm hoping that this continues after the pandemic, and they keep these lessons in mind, and they continue to try to develop new strategies to kind of fill in some of these gaps, because that's right. Not every family is different.
And unfortunately, virtual education, because of it, is not necessarily in that same playing field. As much as the school systems are trying their best to make it equitable and make it accessible, the truth is that we have neighborhood pods that have tutors in some places, and then you also have your neighbor that is watching your kid, and you're taking turns with everybody in the neighborhood to watch everybody's kids do their virtual schooling, because you don't have another option because you have to work. Right. So there are some challenges and there are some concerns, and there are children that struggle more with virtual, but I do think that this is a time for us to take as a lesson of how we can improve for futures, and I don't mean as future pandemics or anything like that. Hopefully this is it, but just with future challenges, because like we said before, there are parents that can't come to a particular thing, or like a school function or a parent-teacher conference, because the work does not allow them to. And along all of those things, I know that most of the parents that will watch us, and most of the families that will watch us today, will be English speaking, but there is also a lot of challenges with language brokering and language accessibility for those families that are English learners. So it's been a year in which I feel like all school systems, all community resources, and all families have had to get very crafty, very creative, and we are just putting out fires as they come up.
Absolutely. I appreciate, excuse me, I muted myself. I apologize. You all have brought up such wonderful points. I love the fact that we were able to talk about really highlighting and emphasizing these concerns or these challenges, while also balancing it out with the lessons learned and kind of the resilience that has been shown also throughout this time with tapping into our creativity, while still understanding that there's still, we hoping, like we said, there's a lot of lessons that we hope that has been learned, and that we take this and really continue to really roll out some more creative ways that we engage our families, the ways in which we go about finding ways to help our students, learn based on their needs, that it really becomes, I know when we talk about systems, it's sometimes not very individualistic, but hopefully that this will allow opportunities for us to really take a more individualized approach as it should. But I would love to continue, in that same vein, as we were talking about the concerns, the biggest areas of concern within within the different education levels, being as though we also want to talk about advocacy. And when we talk about advocacy is helping, understanding, letting caregivers and parents know that they have a voice, and how do they use their voice as a tool, and what advocacy is and what it can look like within the education system. I would love to hear what some of your experiences have been in terms of advocating within these different education levels, based on the areas of concern. I know we're talking present tense in terms of how the pandemic has really impacted these areas of concerns, but even if your experience of advocacy has not been related to a pandemic, would love to hear what has your experience been with advocating within these different education levels.
I guess I will speak to this. I would say that prior to the pandemic, the biggest thing that I saw in working with families was related to students getting suspended, a high level of Black students with disabilities being suspended from school. I mean, primarily most of my calls, that's what it was related to, as well as even a couple of my colleagues. And, what I found that is a lot of parents just didn't know what their rights were, and no one was telling them. And, so they were really, really frustrated, because if your child is not in school, and I'm speaking about students with disabilities, if your child is not in school, your child is not getting a FAPE, a free appropriate public education, which is entitled to them under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. And just parents not being aware. And then two, I found that a lot of times parents in schools, once they reached a disagreement, they were like at a standstill. And so it was just letting parents know, hey, you have a lot of power. There are different mechanisms that you can use to your advantage to help your student, when you're in the school, have a disagreement. So a lot of parents, and a lot of times dispute resolution solutions, they're not utilized. There's mediation. A lot of times mediation works out. When my daughter was in school, I think we used mediation maybe like on 3 different occasions, and it worked beautifully. If that does not work, you could always file a complaint with the Virginia Department of Education. And then lastly, if that doesn't work, typically that does work out, but if that doesn't work, there's also due process, and we've had to do this. It's, parents don't use it enough, and it can be costly unless you're able to find, an advocate or an attorney that would do it pro bono, because it can be really, it was expensive for my husband and I when we did it for our daughter. But those are tools that are available to parents, and no one is telling them. But mediation normally is like the first thing, if you've exhausted all your other, if you've exhausted everything else, you know what I mean? You've met with the IEP team, you guys are not getting anywhere. You've even contacted a special education director, and that's not working out. Then I would highly recommend maybe, using mediation. And with that, you will contact the Virginia Department of Education. They will supply a mediator, to facilitate discussion between the parents and the school system. So like I was saying, a lot of parents just don't know what their rights are, and they don't realize that they have a lot of power. You're just as important you're very important when it comes to your child's IEP, individualized education plan. you have a lot of power. And a lot of parents, they just don't know. They will take what the school says and, you know, and that's it. But there are some other things that they can do. And, you know, so that's my role to help, you know, let them know, hey, these are some things that you can do. A lot of times parents are not even aware that sometimes it could just be a matter of the parents just having someone with them at their IEP. A lot of parents are doing it alone. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. You can bring someone with you. I know right now, most IEPs are done virtually. So you can have someone at your home with you. You know, you may need someone to take notes so that way you can better focus. But anyway, I've kind of rambled on a bit. But anyway.
No, that's awesome. Oops, sorry, Tamika. I was going to say you're not rambling at all. I think this is information that, like you said, so many of our parents and caregivers don't know about these tools. And if it is even mentioned, it's mentioned probably in such a way where it doesn't make sense. We don't understand it. And then they're also not guided on how to actually get access to it. And so really appreciate you talking about this. This is great information. Tamika?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, that's why I started doing this, because as one of those parents who wasn't aware of anything, I found out my son had autism when I was 22. So I was a young mother. I didn't know what autism meant. I definitely didn't know the process, the IEP. I knew nothing about nothing. And like you said, I had nobody telling me anything. So that's why I do what I do. So, you know, someone else may not have to go through the long journey that I've been through. I'm still going through it. The suspensions, my son being placed in handcuffs. And it's just, you know, they want me to be mad with the officer, but it's like, I can't be mad at this man. He's doing his job, but I'm mad at the people who sat in these meetings with me and we came up with certain plans and none of them were present when this was taking place. So, like you said, it's due process. I started going over heads. You don't want to give my son this? Okay, I'm calling the school board. Let them come down here, sniff up under y'all a little bit, see how y'all like that. It went from that to I bring the whole squad to the meeting now. I was able to find a advocate through Peter Paul pro bono. She uncovered a lot. I held my daughter back a grade because she uncovered a whole lot. And then one thing my dad told me, don't go in there flying off the handle. When I got that call that my son was in handcuffs, you know, as mama bear, you want to go up there and tear some stuff up. But daddy, he's like, no, Mika, just, you know, try to stay calm and go and talk. And that was another thing that I realized, that when I actually started talking and listening more and being more open-minded, we had a lot of disagreements in the meetings, but at some point, everybody realized we were here for the benefit of the child. So it took 4 to 5, sometimes 6 IEP meetings in a year, but we got it done. And, you know, sometimes I still lost my cool, but because of the rapport that I built with them, they understood mom's just having an off day. So I will say that, just, you know, it's a long battle. Like you said, it can become expensive. It's exhausting. It's tiring, but if you keep being persistent and pushing, it'll get done.
Sorry. Yes, Gabriela.
I absolutely agree with you, ladies. And I agree with Ms. Copeland's statement before. Most parents don't know what their rights are. And I work in a lot of Title I schools. So there is a lot of parents, especially immigrant parents, that are just so happy that their children are getting free education that otherwise they wouldn't have gotten back at home, that they tend to just say, yeah, this is great. Even if it's not great, this is great. And one of the things that I tell parents all the time is that if schools were a business, you are the customer. You know, you as a parent, you have rights, you are the customer. And you as a parent, you're your child's first educator and #1 advocate. You know your child more than anybody else out there. And really, it is important that you mention those things and you ask those questions that you have, even if you think that they might not be relevant, especially if your child has special needs. Or any kind of needs. One of the examples that I'm going to use, it happened to me right before the schools closed in-person classes for the pandemic. Due to the lack of language brokering, I was asked to come and do language brokering for Spanish-speaking families, for a Spanish-speaking family and an IEP meeting. And when we were there, I was translating. You know, the parents were comfortable with me because they knew me from doing family engagement in the school. And as we're talking, I start listening to what the parent is saying. I start listening to what the IEP people are saying. They have a speech specialist because they were under the impression that the child had, you know, a speech disability. And as we're talking, I stopped for a second the meeting and I said, can I just have a conversation with mom? And they allowed me to do that. And as I was talking to the mom, I got to find out enough important information that made us realize that we were missing something big. And it's that this family was from Mexico, but yet their first language was not Spanish. It was Mixteco, which is a native tongue in Mexico. And as I'm talking to this mom, the speech, you know, like the speech specialist seems to think that there is a disconnect because she doesn't feel that it's a speech problem. She's trying to figure out what it is. So then I said, what do you guys speak at home? And she says, we speak Mixteco. And I said, okay, so you speak Mixteco, you're actively teaching your child Spanish, and now your child is trying to learn English in school. This child didn't have a speech, she didn't have a speech disability or needed an IEP per se. This child was learning 3 languages at the same time. Mom never thought of saying anything about it because she didn't think it was important that her first language at home was not Spanish. But because of that, it made a whole change in the trajectory of her child's education was going to go. And thankfully, we caught it at the preschool level. But it is important for parents to know that if you think something, even if you think it's not important, if you think that there is something specific about your life or your child or your family at home that may be a factor in your child's education, speak up for your child. Ask that question. No question, like mom didn't think it was a big deal because nobody spoke Spanish in the school. So she didn't think she was going to win anything. I mean, sorry, nobody spoke Mixteco in the school. Like, she didn't think she was going to get anything about mentioning that the language they spoke at home was Mixteco. And she's right. I don't speak Mixteco, but I understand that it's a completely different tongue. Mm-hmm. So it is important for parents to understand that, they have rights, for parents to understand that they are their child's #1 advocate and that nobody knows their child better than they do. And for parents to remember that they're not alone. Just like there are community resources that can help them, there is also hundreds of parents, thousands depending on the school, that may be in the same position as them or might be advocating for the same thing individually. And one of the things that I've seen this year with the pandemic is parents getting to know each other. Parents that weren't friends before or that didn't really know other parents in their school, out of pure necessity, have had to learn who their child is having classes with, who their family is, and how to share resources. And Olivia knows this because a few years ago, I did it in one of the preschools. I did a parent like WhatsApp group and put like 10 parents in it, and it grew a little bit. And then they always like shared information about the school, asked questions in the group. And then preschool, at least at the Richmond level, when the kids go from preschool into elementary school, these preschool centers, they're regional. So they go and get separated into all sorts of different schools. So those parents might never be together again. And something very strange happened that I found out about at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's that one of the parents from this original preschool decided that she liked that system. So she brought it to her elementary school and started inviting parents, and they started sharing resources, from health resources to COVID checks to all sorts of different things, what was happening in the school. And more parents joined. And now there's like 80 parents in this group. And funny enough, every single time that something happens in the school, by the time that you would think that I would share something with them, parents have already shared it with each other, because they found strength and information in the numbers within themselves. So when you empower parents to work with each other, to talk about what the child needs, and to talk to other parents about it too, that they can get a lot of things done and they can provide each other with resources. There is nothing more important than peer-on-peer interaction, parent-on-parent support.
Gabriela, you really just kind of opened up my follow-up question to the question about like what are some, what experience have you had in advocating within these education levels? And you really went to the next question where we talked about like what tips would you have for parents as they develop their knowledge, strength, as they learn how to feel more empowered when it comes to advocating. And you all already started touching on that. And just to recap real quick, when we talk about advocacy, it's important that they know their rights, is what I heard. It's important that they know that they are not alone and that no question is insignificant, no question is irrelevant or not, or stupid or anything. That if you have an inkling of a thought that this might be something worth considering, don't hesitate to bring it up as you're communicating either with your child's teacher, if it's in an IEP meeting or whatever. And then Gabriela, you really hit on talking about the strengths of, and when we talk about empowering parents, is how parents too can be their own resources to one another, can be their, that's another tool. I want to open it up to everyone again to talk about what are some other tips that you have learned as you've advocated through the education system. What are some helpful tips that could help our listeners when it comes to advocating within the education system?
One of the things that Gabriela mentioned also is that parents know their kids better than anyone. So just reminding kids about that, parents sometimes are may be intimidated by the fact that you have, these professionals that are part of your child's IEP team. And I just remind parents that you're the expert when it comes to your child. So you are as equally important. You're actually more important than the other team members there because, your child may have school a certain amount of hours a day, but you have your child, many more hours than that, plus weekends and holidays. But one of the tips that I always share with parents, because I learned this like when my daughter was like, I guess about 7 or 8, because I didn't know my rights up until she was about 7, maybe, is that always leave a paper trail. You want to document everything. Any communication, when you have communications with the school, whether it be a phone call, IEP meetings or whatever, you want to follow up with an email, you want to have a paper trail. I mean, it's just very helpful. Not that you will ever, it's not that you're going to need it for, it's not necessarily, something, it just really helps. It's going to help you stay organized. If you need to refer back to something, that information is there. If for some reason you have to file due process, you know what I mean? You're going to have that information. The data doesn't lie. You want to have that there. Also, another helpful tip is I try to tell parents to encourage, parents maybe to have their student be a part of their IEP meeting, starting in elementary school when they're young. That way they're learning about, self-advocacy, advocating for themselves, self-determination. It's really hard for an educator to tell a child no when the child is there expressing, hey, that they need this or they struggle with certain things and I need, it would be helpful to have this kind of support. So I'm just going to go ahead. So those are just 2 little tips that I wanted to mention really quickly and let someone else have a chance to speak.
Yeah, I definitely, that was what I was going to, those 2 recommendations were ones that I was going to share. Number 1, to remember that you are in fact the team expert. It's easy to walk into a room. Usually when you go into these meetings, you're like the last one that's brought into the room. Everybody's sitting there, stern face, papers out, and it just throws you off your game. It really makes you feel like, like you're less, or you don't have the same background. Everybody has the fancy titles and alphabet soup, but You are the one who knows your child best. And if you think about it, these people went to years of school and they still have to come to you for the details. So that lets you know your power as a parent. Also, um, you know, only you can be the parent or caregiver of that child. But if you had the time and the resources, you can learn their jobs. So you have a role that's very specific. There's nobody's roles in that room that you, if you had the desire and the resources, you can as well learn. So remembering that. The paper trail is also very important to remember. It helps you keep, you know, your thoughts organized, keep the track of the process. It's very important to set the goals, but also to keep communication frequent so that you're making sure that progress is still going, to check in to see if anything needs to be modified and adjusted. Don't feel like a decision is the final decision. So, you know, if you notice something changes, bring that up immediately so that you can start getting different things modified to address new challenges. Or it may be that a skill was learned faster than you thought it would be. So now it's time to bring that up, check that off, and move on to the next one. Let's not waste time still focusing on something that your child has mastered. The other thing that I always suggest is, don't just focus on today, think about tomorrow. Because if you just focus on today, the team is just going to focus on making goals and providing supports on today. And your child is not always going to be 7, 8, or 9 before you know it. Trust me, because my oldest one just turned 21. And I swear it happened in a blink of an eye. Before you know it, they're going to be adults. And it's really hard by the time they're in their last year of school to say, oops, we should have done this. And now we don't have time, or now we have to rush it, but my child needs extra time to learn and process. So, you know, having those communications with your student, starting to look at some of their strengths and interests, and starting to kind of, you know, try to figure out, you know, you're really good at this. Maybe we should think about a career in this area. And what would that look like for you? And what kind of supports do we need to help you get to that point? And then as they get older, remembering to include their ideas of what their future looks like. Bring that to the meeting, and then have the team kind of work backwards. So this is where we want to go. This is where we need to start right now. So those are always my suggestions for parents with the advocating. And again, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Um, and when you do hear suggestions in meetings, immediately follow up the suggestion with the question and who's going to be in charge of that. Because it often you'll hear, you know, yes, we'll work on this, but nobody's attached to it, so there's nobody to hold accountable for it, and everybody kind of just hands up, well, I thought he was going to do it, I thought she was going to do it, and nobody did it. So always follow up a suggestion with that's great, I like that, who's going to be in charge with that, so I can come back and check in. So those are my different recommendations.
That is very helpful. Thank you both. Tamika, I see you.
Yeah, and I have to, it's kind of piggybacking off of what Ms. Shackelford said. Mine were to be to make sure that everyone that has any type of involvement with your child is there too. Like, it's important that everyone is on the same page. So, my son and daughter, they have a case manager from RBHA, they have an in-home, and then it was an advocate. So it's like everybody needs to be on the same page. You can't have a meeting and come up with this grand old plan and then it's only being implemented in the school, or it's
Right.
implemented in the school and then when you get home, something else being done. And then when they with this person for X amount of hours during the week, something else going on. And that's where a lot of chaos comes and inconsistency, and the things that and goals you're trying to reach become harder to reach because everybody's not on the same page. So when I have meetings, I make sure everybody's there and everybody gets to bring to the table what they get from the child, because the child essentially may be 3 different personalities with each one of the people that they work with. So I find that's how you get the best results. And for me, another thing Ms. Shackelford said, piggybacking off of it with, you know, a lot of times they'll make suggestions and nobody's name is attached. And that's to keep the lines of communication open with the main teacher. I know I've been in meetings where, due to the fact that I'm always talking to the teacher, we're texting, we're calling, emails and all of that. I know what's going on. I know what she's trying to do. But when we get in the meeting, somebody else is saying, well, this person didn't do such and such. And I told this person to do such and such. But it's like, well, I know what's been going on because I've been talking to such and such. So you don't get to throw this person under the bus because I already know what's been going on because this person keeps me informed. So those are my two big things. Keep the lines of communication open with the main teacher, counselors, and to make sure everyone involved with your child is at the table.
And also, sorry. And
Okay.
also one of the things, I mean, these are all fantastic tips, definitely for parent advocacy, especially when it comes to children with special needs. But just for all parents in general, it's important for them to know that I know that sometimes school administrators or teachers can look really intimidating. They may feel like, oh, well, they know what's best for my child. And they do have your child's best interest in hand. Nobody's denying that. But you know more than anyone what is best for your child. And I know that sometimes parents may think, well, I don't want to make a big fuss about this, or I don't want to say something because I don't want to get anyone upset, or I'm sure my child will catch up, or maybe he'll understand later. I think it's important for you to know as a parent, you can say what's on your mind. You have the right to go and say, I don't think this is working out for my child, or my child needs extra support in this area, or I don't understand what this report from the PALS, let's say, for example, it's saying about my child's learning. Like, how do I help my child? It's okay to ask those questions. One of the things that I tell parents very often is, you know what the difference between the schools with the higher scores and the schools with the lower scores are? In a lot of cases, are the parents. Parents that create groups and PTAs, and when they see something go wrong with the school, they say, no, not in this school, because I just got all of these parents together and we're going to change this. Or they see something wrong in the school, maybe something that needs help and is not in the budget to get help, or whatever the case is, and they gather together to fix something about the school or to help with a deficit that there is. When parents get involved, they can make a ton of difference. Like, let's say, for example, last year, before the pandemic shut everything down, I was at a preschool in which they lost one of their custodians. And a retired grandfather saw that there was not enough help at the time, and he went there and helped fill that deficit until they were able to get somebody else to step into the plate, so that all the children could have a nice, clean, perfectly good school. 2 years ago, I had a mom that said, well, the school is fantastic, but outside of the school, because it's an older building, there is like mud accumulation and leaf accumulation, and the water freezes and is really slick when you're picking up your child and walking to your car. So many people have slipped or they can fall. And she got a group of parents together and they did an outdoor cleanup of the entire area to make the school safe. The truth is that as a parent, you get a very different experience than what staff get in a school. So things that staff might not notice because they might not experience, like picking up their child from school with certain conditions, you can raise awareness to that, or in some cases, you can do something about it. You know, really, one of the biggest differences that you can make in a school, it's really using your voice. And when you can, gathering parents and do and use your own resources, regardless of if that is manpower or whatever the case is, to improve things in the school. No help is little. And in most of the cases, when you talk to the right people in the school, you can get a lot done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gabriela. Two things I just want to hit on, and we'll keep moving, is that I really appreciate you saying, really speaking to the point about how sometimes approaching an administrator or your child's teacher can be intimidating. And I'll just add to say that, you know, they actually need your feedback, you know, so speaking to the parents, like, they need your feedback. They need you to say, this is my experiences in the home with my child, and we don't think this is working. They oftentimes, it may not seem like it, but they want that. They actually want to have that type of connection. And if it has been a different experience where it doesn't seem like they're open to your feedback, hopefully, everything else that has been said about how to use your voice to go to the next person, finding that right person to speak to within that school system, and utilizing these resources are helpful, but especially to not let that feeling or that look of intimidation stop you from really expressing what it is that you feel is important to share regarding your child's need. In many cases, teachers and administrators want your feedback, and they need it, whether they admit to it or not. And so I know that we have gotten really close to our time, but I wanted to ask real quick, can we spend a couple of more minutes? Because I know that we really wanted to really offer just some additional resources. Is that okay if we can take maybe about another 10 minutes or so to talk a little bit more about some resources? Is that okay? Awesome. I had a follow-up question too, but it escaped me. But if it comes back, I'll make sure I add that back in. Matter of fact, I just remembered. We were talking about parents' rights. And while you all were talking, I wanted to see if someone could, as quick as you can, maybe just speak to that parent who is feeling defeated, doesn't really know which way to turn. They feel stuck. They feel like they hit a roadblock. How can they begin? What would be the first step where they can go to learn about their rights? Where can they go to learn about parent rights, or to connect with someone to give them that support that they might need in advocacy?
Well, I would say if, for a parent in that particular situation, I think the first thing that I would do, if you haven't already, I would probably reach out. If it's a parent, I'm speaking from a disability perspective, because that's what the lens I'm looking through. Reach out, like if your child has autism or Down syndrome, I think that I would probably first reach out to one of those organizations, that is related to my child's disability. Call them and tell them, what you're going through, what your situation is currently. Most of the time, almost all the time, they're going to give you some information to help you. It may be that they contact someone within their organization to kind of help guide you through the process. So that's one thing that you can do. You could always contact the ARC of Virginia. They're another helpful resource. Every state has a DD counselor. So if your child has some kind of developmental disability, or they're like developmentally delayed, you can contact the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. That's Virginia's Developmental Disability Council. Every state has one. So you can contact them. You can also reach out to the Virginia Department of Education. They will more than likely, it's possible that they will lead you to my organization, because we partner with we partner with them a lot. So they will probably connect you with the organization that I work for, where you would be, given to, you would be, they will refer you to one of us over at the Center for Family Involvement at the People with, what is the name of my organization? At the Partnership for People with Disabilities. So there are a lot of different things that you could do where you could, they'll probably pair you up. We'll probably pair you up, maybe even another parent, because it sounds like at that point, really, you probably need some emotional support to kind of help let you know, hey, you can do this. I know it's tough. Hearing that from another parent who's kind of been through, some of the same things that you've been through, I think you need that, probably want to start with having that emotional support. And I've worked with parents who've been in that kind of situation where they've just kind of shut down. They're not taking the school phone calls. They're not participating in meetings. So I think getting some kind of that emotional support will really, really be helpful. And it may be that at that point, maybe you're just kind of burnt out, and maybe you need to reach out to, someone who specializes with like mental health. Make sure your mental health is in check so that, you're prepared to do what you need to do for, your child.
Thank you so much. That I think that you made a great point, is even like you said, speaking to that emotional support and even mental health support, because we know that advocacy can it can be really challenging, and it can take a lot out of you. And so really being connected to some supports to kind of help you reset and kind of gain some composure, if you will. But then also going back to what Gabriela said, is really having a network, a support network where you're not alone. You don't feel like you're alone in that feat. And so you, I appreciate you, Mauretta, and what you shared. And I kind of want to open this next question up to everyone. And so, like, thinking about the work that you do specifically, how do you help families get connected to resources? So, thinking about your specific roles and the type of families that you work with, how do you help families get connected to resources, and what are those resources?
Well, this is a year for flexibility. There is really no other way to put it. And the truth is that families get resources in many different ways. While some families are all about social media, or some families are all about checking their email, some families need a good old-fashioned phone call, or depending on where they're from, especially for those families that have come to the United States, and which we now have a very high population of immigrant families here in Virginia. They might use other resources such as like WhatsApp, or like, what is the name of the other one that they use? I can't remember. It's like another messaging board, and in which they can share with each other and exchange information. So my recommendation would be, or at least what I do, is I try to be flexible. If I'm going to share a resource, it needs to be concise. Right now, families are being overwhelmed by a tornado of information constantly, from emails to social media to everything. So having the information concise and direct can be very helpful. If you're going to send an email, but maybe also share it in your social media, because some parents might be following you and that's how they're getting their information. If you have like a group, like messaging system, put it in your messaging system. I mean, that's what I've done to provide all sorts of different resources. And even though I am terrible with social media, because I don't feel like I'm part of the young generation at all, I've had to get a little bit more savvy in regards to that. You know, understand that we need to be very forgiving with families, and we need to, you know, just kind of lead with grace. This is an era in the world in which everything is very forgiving. Social media is forgiving, YouTube is forgiving, everything is forgiven, because you see now newscasts being, you know, broadcasted from people's living rooms and stuff like that. Even television is become forgiving, and that's the reason why we were able to put a children's TV show together during the summer, because we had to just get crafty and understand that it was not going to be this perfectly big Disney production or anything like that, but that we could do something at the local level with, you know, educators and musicians and artists that were just all volunteering their time to put something together for our kids. The truth is that you have to try to find a way to get the word out in as many ways as possible. Families are overwhelmed right now. So if they have you as a trusted source of information, then they will be better informed. When other parents get together and they join support groups, or they join like group chats for their school or things like that, they're able to share information with each other. And when I say information with each other, I don't mean as only things pertaining to the school. Like, let's say, for example, with everything that happened this past week, with the stimulus money that has come in for different things, you know, like pandemic EBT came back to life for many of these families. And families that maybe didn't think that they were eligible for this program got the information from other families and found out that they were, you know, they were able to share resources with each other. So it's important that there is flexibility, and that you show parents that you have information tailored in many ways. Make a flyer, make a video, send a message. You know, all of those things are different ways. Some people will read an entire document but won't watch a video. Some families will not read a text message, but they'll watch a video. So it's just a matter of flexibility, and find out where your resources are, depending on the grade level and the needs of your child.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Would anyone else like to add to that? How are you helping families get connected to educational resources, and what are those resources?
Yeah, I think Gabriela shared some great points and things that we have been trying to take into consideration. It's been a challenge because I am not a social media person either, and I've learned a lot. I've recruited my teams to help me understand a lot of it, so I appreciate them. But you know, she's right. Like having to be flexible. Also, I think, you know, with that, being mindful and gentle. So like what you were saying, like families are getting a lot of information. I think all of the different resources were all kind of like, over here, you know, we can help you with this and we can help you with that. And you know, trying to take it all in can be overwhelming for families. So just understanding, as an organization, you may not get that response on your post, but the families see it. They may not, you know, like or respond or share or whatever. So keep up with it to make sure that you are getting the word out. A lot of when families reach out to me, I sit down and learn about the students' needs. Um, you know, those that are related to behavioral needs or some learning needs, we may be able to assist them with. But if it's something that we feel that one of the other organizations will do a better job with, we will go ahead and do like an intro email, give them specific contact people to follow up with. One of the organizations, other than the Partnership for People with Disabilities, where Mauretta is, and the Center for Family Involvement, I do a lot of referrals to PEATC, PEATC, which is the Parent Education Advocacy Training Center, PEATC. They offer a ton of free workshops, and they even started with some e-courses now for families that you can kind of do at your own pace, webinars. They just had a online symposium that usually is in person. They do a lot of different things throughout the year. They do have resources for military families and Spanish speaking families as well. So they are a great resource that I tap into a lot. And then, like Mauretta said, the ARC of Virginia, the Autism Society, the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Richmond, and just, you know, we are in the Google generation. So, um, you know, I feel like a lot of parents, like for me, like I said, I have children with disabilities, and a lot of times it's like 12 o'clock at night when everybody's in bed and I'm on my phone and I'm Googling, you know. So that has introduced me to a lot of other resources that are like nationwide nonprofits or things like that. So I keep a running list. And then as families reach out, depending on what their needs are, I'll kind of share with them a little sheet with, like, these are your to-dos. This is where you are. This is where you want to get to. Contact this person. Look at this website. So yeah, I try to tailor it to their specific needs. But the resources are out there. They really are. It's a matter of looking for them, but I think that has improved because I think because again of the pandemic, we're starting to see organizations just like in this meeting now, they're starting to come together and share their resources, which is making them more accessible.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important what you just mentioned, you know, referrals.
Mm-hmm.
When you know that something is out of your lane, stick to your lane. That's what you're good at.
Yeah.
And I do find myself referring a lot of people to a lot of places because ExCELL works mostly with early childhood. We work pre-K to first grade for the most part. And well, we have fantastic resources like our TV show, our YouTube channel with like parent tips, activities, and ways to help children at home, because that's really what we do with all of our like family engagement. We provide educational resources for families so that parents know how to do the same things that teachers are doing in the classroom in an easy way and support that learning. There are many things that we don't do, so those referrals need to go out to other either organizations for, let's say, for example, older grade levels or special needs, like in the case of both of your organizations. It's very important that more than ever partners work together, and that we do working through partnership, because especially here in the state of Virginia, we really have some amazing resources just in our backyard, and we don't have to look very far as long as we work in partnership with each other to really provide the best service possible to our families, because, well, in a way, we're all in this together, and we all got into the professions in our different professions because we want to serve the community that we live in.
Absolutely. This has been an amazing conversation. It has been a wealth of knowledge for me, and I can only imagine how insightful this has been for those watching. We have come to the close of our time. I want to just thank each and every one of you. I'm going to hand this back off to you, Tamika, to close us out, but I just want to express how much I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I don't know about you, Tamika, but I think there might need to be a part 3, because it's just too much information to have in just an hour, which I think we probably have gone over already. So we're going to go ahead and close it up, but look ahead for part 3 to advocacy and education.
So I just want to thank you all so much, Dr. Z, Mauretta, and Gabriela. I really appreciate you guys and the wealth of information that I even received. I know it's going to benefit our communities so much. So just thank you guys again for taking the time out to do this. It is greatly appreciated. And thank you all for tuning in to Advocacy and Education Part 2. There will be a Part 3 in the future, but please stay tuned. We'll be back April 7th for Advocacy and Mental Health Part 2 on April 7th on our Facebook page at 7 p.m. So thank you all again, and see you next time.